Hey everybody, this is another installment of our webinar log on getting everybody back to their workplace. And I think this is session 4 or 5, we've lost track at this point. And we'll take you through a couple reminders. I'm here this time with Lisa Hagen again, who's a senior manager in our HR outsourcing team. I am Jenn McCabe, I'm a partner on the consulting teams here at Armanino. And today we've got Leslie Herrarte, and she is an HR solutions specialist, and she helps us with HR and payroll matters all the time. And today what we want to have her talk to us about is all the various travel policies that people should be thinking about now that we're all really not traveling in the age of COVID, but we're all thinking about traveling. So Leslie has been thinking about that and writing some content, and we are going to drill her with questions for everybody. Okay, so now I'm going to kick it back to Lisa, and we'll start moving through this.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Are we going to move to the next slide?
I am trying my hardest to do that, and there we go.
There we go. All right, so first a little recap. In our other episodes, we covered the CARES Act, some of the provisions that are in there. We also covered this tracker, and so I want to talk about that for just a second and how we're using this information. So since we're talking about getting back to work and getting back to traveling some, the ways we're looking at using this technology are, you know, maybe Leslie is getting ready to travel to Kansas, and I don't know why, but maybe. And so we want to look to see how Kansas is doing. When did their stay-at-home order expire? How are the rates looking there? Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it staying steady? So that's one of the things we're looking at in relationship to this current topic with the tracker. And then there's all kinds of other stuff we can look at with the data that we have on our website. So not just the case tracker, which is showing the number of cases, but also the foot traffic. Are people going to parks? Are people going to office buildings? Probably not movie theaters, but where are the people that are moving around going? And transportation, how are they getting there? You know, and before all of this happened, lots of people were taking metros and public transportation, and now that's just not as much of a thing. So we're seeing a huge uptick in walking and then of course driving. And home versus away, how many people are staying home all the time and how many people are getting back out there? So that's some of the information that you can drill down on to get more information and more kind of intuitive thought process going on why these numbers may or may not be changing.
Right, and today is June 30th as we record this, I should say that. And what is interesting on the home versus away, it's a way of tracking people who stay home 100% of the time. And a month ago, that was more than 60% in a lot of cases. And in the last week or so, it's been down to 30 to 40%, and the trends are not good. And when you look at foot traffic in certain areas and also the number of cases going up, the curve is very interesting. You might see foot traffic going up radically to malls. And in that same area, you'll see that the COVID cases are going up. So you can draw inferences and decide what you're going to do. We do a lot of looking at office building traffic in various metro areas, obviously. So it's really fun, and it can help you make decisions with data instead of just going, yeah, it feels good about, let's go back to the office, let's try it out. You can actually use our tracker and use the data to make your decision.
Okay, and then the other technology piece that we're really proud of and excited about is this app. And the app is really great for when you decide to open the office back up, make sure the office is safe, and also make sure that the employees are safe enough to come, or healthy enough to come back to the office. And so this is a mobile app, and they just pull it up on their phones, complete a few questions, and then, you know, get their results, as well as they're sent confidentially to the office HR person or whoever's designated to receive those results. The other thing we're thinking about here is that maybe this app can be used for employees even when they're remote. You know, maybe they're traveling and you'd like them to check in when they land or when they get to their hotel. maybe what they're traveling for work, and you want, like I said, you want them to check in with you, or maybe they don't work in your same office, but you'd still like everybody to check in and have a record of being healthy enough to be working.
Yeah, on this travel subject, I was thinking that if I sent you today to Atlanta, Georgia to do a meeting where there's a really big time increase in cases, and you
Right.
say, no, I'm good, I want to go, Jen, and you go there, I might want you to check in every day, and then I would want you to check in when you come back for the
Yes.
next 7 to 14 days. And maybe I would tell you not to come to work until I've watched you check in on this app every day. You know, maybe that's what I want to do. So we could use this creatively. And also, we should say you don't need to have people using this who are going to an office per se, right?
True.
In our last
Any
position,
workplace.
yeah, we were an assembly line where you want people to be socially distant and check in and be healthy.
Mm-hmm. And then this is the QR code that you'd receive that shows that you have completed the assessment and that you are fit to go into work. And then it shows the next time that you're eligible to do it. So this is an everyday occurrence, every day that you plan to go into to work. Pardon?
Could I do it like 5 times a day if I wanted? If you asked me, Lisa, I think we asked somebody to customize it the other day. They can do that, right?
Yes, absolutely. We can customize to whatever might make sense for each particular situation.
Cool. All
Yeah.
right. Easy to use on your cell phone. I love it. Now
Yep.
what we're going to do is we're going to show everyone our horrible to-do list, which is always daunting to look at for me. It's many pages long, but we've distilled it into 3, and we are not going to make everyone look at this. What we're going to do today is skip tech, which we just highlighted. We're passing over communication and some of the other HR policies and safety things, which we've covered in a different session. We're going to talk about travel policies with Leslie. So Leslie, let's start at the top of this. We're just going to cover those top 4 things. I know that it's a lot. It's just summarized very briefly here. So tell me about this. Why first of all, is it an interim update? And what are you thinking about when you look at that?
So interim because, of course, you know, these things are changing on a daily basis, depending on how the trends are going with the COVID tracker. And so, you know, there are people who are going to have, you know, different medical conditions, whether it's physical and mental or, you know, other sorts of issues. And this can make them more high risk for the severe illness. And so you want to make sure that you're providing your employees with all their protective gear, taking all the precautionary measures, and all that good stuff. And I think the most important thing from here is that, you know, you want to be careful as to, you know, the way that the workplace is set up in terms of separate employees, you know, distancing employees and providing all of the, you know, safety measures, but also, you know, taking employees.
Gosh, I'm sorry. Hold on. I want to make sure I'm showing the list here. My computer is not my own. I still am online, right? Just want to make sure. There you go.
We still see it. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay,
All good.
keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but my computer is doing things on a table that's moving and I'm not moving it. So stop for a second. So you said the most important thing is making sure that they feel safe, or are you trying to make sure that the company isn't making people travel who shouldn't?
Well, really it's both. So travel is one thing, you know, it can be business travel, it can be personal travel. And the other thing is, you know, safety and personal accommodations for at-risk staff. So, you know, I think here with the at-risk staff, you want to make sure that, you know, if an employee comes to you and asks for some type of workplace accommodation, that you go through the interactive process and you ask questions and you ask them to provide you documentation, doctor's note, things like that to prove or to find out why they're asking for accommodation. They can't just simply say they don't feel safe or they're not ready to return to the workplace because they're paranoid or scared, but there has to be a legitimate reason behind it.
Really?
Yeah.
So what if I came to you and I said, I actually didn't know this, so this is fascinating. So if I came to you and said, Leslie, I do not want to go to Atlanta. There's a bunch of cases there. And you said, but Jen, you and Lisa are going there because I want you to do a meeting.
Right.
What, and I was just scared and you really needed me to go. But what if I pointed you and said, look at how bad the cases are there. I actually should be told to go. So the company can still do that.
Well, you know, the company should try to accommodate as reasonable as possible. So if there is a possibility to, you know, convert the meeting into a virtual meeting or a phone call or video, a Zoom, anything like that, I think that would be a better way to handle it instead of forcing employees to go. However, I think on the flip side, if an employee, you know, has, you know, pre-existing conditions, or if they're older, or if they're pregnant, things like that, employers can't just make the assumption that they're high risk because of these reasons. Instead, the employee has to basically kind of prove their reasoning behind the accommodations, and then again start the interactive process, document, and just try to do everything possible to accommodate the employee.
Well, what kind of questions would you ask me if I said, hey, look, I don't want to go, I have a pre-existing condition. What kind of questions are you allowed to ask that don't violate my privacy?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I mean, you really have to be careful with the things that you do ask. I mean, even just alone taking employee's temperature feels, you know, awkward because we're not accustomed to, you know, doing that kind of thing in the workplace. So you really have to be careful with the way that you communicate with the employees. I think the best approach would be, you know, to ask them to provide a doctor's note, excusing them, or, you know, providing more information. And then the doctor will be able to provide some sort of information, and you can take it from there. Typically, the employee will provide a doctor's note along with a leave of absence request form. And a lot of times the employer does have the ability to then ask for a doctor's certification, which is essentially just kind of double checking with the doctor that it is, you know, that this person does need accommodations. And so you really just need to take it on a case-by-case basis, depending on each employee's circumstances.
Hey, when you say case-by-case basis, that's interesting. So say that I need to send a note out to everyone at my company that says travel is resuming.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, that's my policy. And then
Right.
I would say, but bring it to me if you have a reason for being unable to travel. And then you can get a doctor's note, but I mean, what if I just don't want to travel because I'm old and therefore I'm high risk? You know, that actually does apply to me.
Yeah.
So if I'm old and I don't want to travel and I'm high risk, I don't have a doctor's note, but I fall into the high risk category. Could I provide you with the COVID, if you're on this list kind of thing that says I'm over 65 years old and therefore I'm high risk? Is that enough and I can still work and I don't want to leave of absence?
I mean, Lisa, feel free to chime in on this one. I think, again, you want to be reasonable with the accommodations. You know, are you able to accommodate this elder employee by, you know, again, you know, can they, instead of attending this meeting in person, can they do it, you know, via Zoom, or, you know, via phone call or Skype or something like that? You know, if that's reasonable, if that's acceptable, then that can be used as an accommodation. But typically, without putting too many, you know, details into this scenario, typically if an employee just, let's say they're not older and they're just, you know, a healthy young employee and they're scared to travel or to attend these in-person meetings for whatever reason, being afraid is not enough to, you know, is not enough of a reason to not complete, you know, your job responsibilities. And so that, you know, that needs to, more communication needs to be involved in that essence.
I think that's so important that you said that, because I think that most employers respond with, yeah, they're not comfortable, so we don't want to make them, which is reasonable. It could be that right now it's very reasonable that people,
Absolutely.
I think, don't want to get on planes, even though they might be just fine, but it's still, they might not be fine. So you don't want to make them. So your advice is, if it's reasonable to do a Zoom meeting and it's reasonable and the client is cool with it, that you would say, look, you don't have to go. But it needs to be reasonable. So in that case, I would have to go to Atlanta because only my fingerprint opened the safe at the meeting room or something like that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's really an interim update because it's for now and we hope it goes away and that business gets normal next year sometime, hopefully sooner. And that's the business travel. And what is this, an employee interim vacation travel? So that's me, I go on vacation. What are you recommending?
So basically that's an employee's personal travel. And essentially what we're saying is, you know, that employees should be precautious, you know, and should ensure that they're being respectful of the health of their fellow colleagues and the people around them. And, you know, overall, we're encouraging employees to avoid any personal travel outside of the U.S. during this time. The CDC has set restrictions of entry to the U.S. for travelers returning from certain countries under Level 3 travel health notice, and they have listed those countries on the CDC website. And so really we encourage everyone, not just the employees, but just everyone to stay on top of that and to be cognizant of the travel restrictions. And if for any reason an employee still decides to travel outside the country, then we would really encourage that the employee comes forward, first of all, comes forward and provides that information to their manager, and also that they quarantine for 14 days upon their return to the U.S.
They quarantine for how long?
14 days.
When they come back?
Correct. Or they can be tested for COVID, and if their results come back negative, they can provide those results to their manager, and they could potentially return sooner than that.
So if I'm thinking about going to visit Lisa, my friend, and she lives in Brazil. Let's use Brazil because Brazil is not a great place to go visit right now.
Brazil is a Level 4, absolutely.
Yes. So the CDC has a level for that country. That's what you're saying. And then so are you advising your clients that they should have a policy written that says, hey, if you're going to a country, you need to let us know and we'll check the CDC levels for that country and we'll determine what we're going to do with you when you come back.
Absolutely. Yes.
So then if I go and say that means we don't have a work from home policy, say, and when I come back, if I quarantine, it means I can't do my job.
Correct.
So that means I got to take more PTO or a leave of some sort.
That's right.
Okay, so it could be if I'm forced to quarantine and I'm forced to quarantine because I've been in Brazil, I assume that's covered by EFMLA or FFCRA leaves. That's an interesting sort of connection to yesterday's session, which was with Britta on leaves. So if one of your employees travels to another country that's a level, warning level, when they come back, it may actually lead to them needing to take a leave. That's really interesting. And what about this residential visitor? So this is, say that my family is Brazilian, I assume, and they come visit me?
Residential visitor.
So to me,
meaning you're having really high risk people in your home, right?
Oh, gotcha. So the opposite, basically. Well, yeah, it's essentially kind of the same guidelines because, you know, they're opening up everyone else to risk as well.
So in that case, a company might consider, and it sort of probably depends on your culture and your staff makeup, it sounds like. And if you have a bunch of employees and you hired a bunch of Brazilians and you're seeing that the CDC says that they're having a terrible time, you might want to write a policy then that says, hey, y'all, if you have someone visiting from Brazil, you need to let us know.
Yes, that's equally as important.
That's interesting. And so would that also be an interim policy then? Because we hope that Brazil gets healthy again in a couple months.
Exactly. Hoping that things get better around the world. Yes.
Okay, so is it your recommendation that people write these policies now instead of waiting till someone comes back from Brazil and their next door neighbor narcs on them and says, hey, did you know Lisa just had grandma come from Brazil?
Yeah, absolutely. You never want them, you never want an employee to feel as though you wrote this policy because of them. You know, you don't want that to be a discrimination issue. So I think just, you know, doing it now in advance proactively and just, you know, making everyone aware as well so that they kind of really double think their traveling plans. I think it's important to just get it done in advance and make sure that it's a blanket statement for everyone on the team.
Okay, so now I want to kind of go back to the COVID tracker for a second and talk to Lisa. So the other day, Lisa, we had a discussion with a company in Northern California where usually their workers go to work on BART, and they get there on public transportation and nobody's doing that, and they want to go back to work. They're free to go back to work, except they can't get their workers to the job site because of the fear of using public transportation, and it's a valid fear. And so the company can either, based on what Leslie just taught us, say, if you want to work, you need to get yourself there. Travel, that's that. But what we were talking about was that people are not paid for their commuting time. So you can't tell them what to do on their commute.
You can strongly encourage, and you can publish what we would call best practices.
Mm-hmm. So we had a fun conversation where this company talked about encouraging carpooling. So using the COVID tracker and using Leslie's notes, the creative solution is we would pay people for their commuting time if they were encouraged to carpool. We might provide them with car cleaning materials. We might provide them with PPE to wear in the car with their colleagues. And we might even tell them that they have to drive with the windows down 100% of the time. But if we do that and we enforce carpooling instead of the metro, the best practice would be to pay those people for their commuting time because you're telling them how to do it, right?
Right.
Okay, so we have travel local, we have travel long distance, we have paying people for their time if you're having them travel on company time. And right now we have interim travel policies that people should be thinking about. And we have,
better to get them in place because you want to be able to, just like a handbook, be able to go back and look at the policies, and you know, whatever you choose to do in those policies, that's going to set the precedent, and that just makes it so much easier if multiple people come to you to ask things. You know, what does our policy say? That just should always be the first place to go look.
Right. And you know, Leslie was talking a lot about interim, like, okay, let's hope that this doesn't last forever. But, you know, we're learning some things that we're going to take into our futures. So in this conversation, I'm wondering what we would take into next year, post-COVID times, in terms of travel safety guidelines. I'm wondering if we should keep the CDC guidance in there, which we didn't really think about very much before. And if someone was going to pick up and go to a country where there was an outbreak of disease or some, like, you know, who knows what kind of disease in what country, what part of the world, I wonder if going forward we would leave those kinds of language in our handbooks on a permanent.
I feel like it's going to be a revisit situation that, you know, maybe at the end of the year when we would normally think about renewing and refreshing a handbook, we're going to come back and see what the status is on a lot of this stuff and see if any of them can be sunsetted or if they need to be reviewed to maybe be incorporated more longer term into our standard policies.
Okay. So our checklist here is what to do readiness before you go back to work, before someone asks you about how they travel, before someone tells you they're scared to travel, before someone tells you that someone's coming from Brazil to visit, you would get a policy ready. And then while you're going along, chugging along over the next 6 months to a year, while we have to figure out how to do, we would probably not just track travel policies for the company, but we might add on the employee and household sort of tracking as we go forward if we need to, because it is a little more invasive. And I think we might need to see by population, you know, and by culture at companies, whether that's necessary or not. And then Lisa, you're saying steady state is, what of this are we going to take going forward?
Yes.
What are we going to do?
What are we going to need?
Yeah, and this whole, you know, reporting someone who comes to your home or reporting that you're going on vacation to someplace is for most Americans fairly new. The idea of reporting what you do in your off time or the idea of reporting your personal health stats is usually quite private. And in these times, it's just not the case. It's a matter of, as they say now, public health. Public health is now a term that we use a lot. All right, I think we've just about beaten that to death. Is there anything that you guys want to add before I flip over to our addresses, or are we good?
I think we did a good job covering it.
All right, so if anybody is listening and wants help with their travel policies, these are our email addresses. You've been listening to Leslie Herrarte, who's thought about this more than anybody. Lisa Hagen is a director in our HR outsourcing team and a senior manager. I'm sorry, I promoted you right there.
That was really exciting.
I know. Now you have something to reach for there. And always available. And then I'm here, Jenn McCabe. I'm a partner in this group. And obviously I have experts that I lean on all the time. I don't know the answers, but I have people here with me today who have your answers if you need them. So go to our website, armaninOllp.com, to find the tracker and other information. And you can find us there by clicking through or by writing us directly at these email addresses. Thank you very much, folks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.